Today, we are finishing up our draft recap, getting into the final three players the Chargers took in the 2022 NFL Draft, including a pair of cornerbacks and one absolute freak of nature fullback.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers together for over 6 seasons, and we're heading into our 5th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen today, and as always, to make sure you don't miss the show, go subscribe to the new Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from, including tomorrow's show talking about Jazier Taylor's 5th-year option being not picked up by the Chargers. But today, we are finishing up our draft recap, getting into the final 3 picks of the draft, but we're shaking things up a little bit. You guys commented and we heard, and now we will deliver you. We'll start the show by everyone's favorite 7th round draft pick that I can think of off the top of my head. I can't remember another 7th round draft pick like Zander Horvath that's been getting attention like this guy has. So we'll talk about the superback, the tank of a fullback the Chargers picked up late in the draft who has an RAS score better than Derrick Henry. But you have to get into that. And I mean, I've seen hurdle people. So that's a crazy story. But we also have to get into a couple other really good stories too about a couple of cornerbacks they're going to try to earn roster spots with the Chargers, and Jazier Taylor, a guy who also brings some kicking game value, as Brandon Staley would put it, and another upside prospect in the last round with Deane Leonard, the Chargers taking him in the 7th round as well. So we'll finish up the show with that and what to expect. That's another cool one. The Chargers with 5 Canadians now on their current roster. That's pretty nuts. But David, we do want to start with who everyone wants us to start with, and that is Zander Horvath. I mean, a guy who I had never heard of. I mean, that's it. First of all, he's a fullback. He really was a running back at Purdue, right? That's what we have to start with. But just to give you an idea of the type of player that he was, this is from ESPN. The 6'3", 230-pound Horvath managed to return to play 8 games his senior season at Purdue, despite suffering a broken fibula in the 2nd game of the season. That's the type of dude that we're talking about here. An absolute physical freak that is going to, we'll see what happens with him on this roster. It's kind of unclear what they plan on doing, but they drafted him. They labeled him as a fullback. Both Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco said they want to at least introduce him as a fullback. But David, I mean, this is an easy guy to get excited about from at least a running hard, giant dude, hurdling people kind of way.
Absolutely. No question, man. This was a really
RB2?
fun... Yeah, absolutely. Step over Isaiah Spiller. This is definitely Zander Horvath's job. Now, no, I am just kidding. But in all seriousness, man, I mean, he was a very fun watch. I think he runs angry and he welcomes contact. I mean, he absolutely is looking to run you over. That is a big part of his game. But he has deceptive burst and acceleration from a bigger man. You just don't expect to see him be able to move the way he does and be able to jump over people. And, you're going to, if you watch a game of his, you're definitely going to see him hurdle at least 1, possibly 2 defenders during the course of the game, because that just seems like a signature move of his. But he also has pretty good damn hands, man. I mean, I didn't see him drop a lot of passes. He's reliable as far as like, a pass catcher in the flats, doing the little angle routes. He's the guy that is going to be able to catch the football and get upfield and get you some extra yards. And also, I would like to say my favorite thing that he does extremely well is convert in short yardage situations. I saw him on 2nd and short, 3rd and short, goal line, 4th and short. He specializes in getting those first downs, and it seems like he has a nose for it, a hunger for it, and he goes out there and he gets it.
Yeah, no hurdle man for it if he has to. But yeah, I mean, when I was at a certain point, I just started doing like the hurdle count and like as far as successful hurdles, because I mean, there was others where he tried to do and it didn't work out. I mean, I had him in the games I watched 4 hurdles where he, actually cleared a dude and kept running. Get yourself a fullback that can
Olympics, sign him up.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, it is a fun prospect, and it is kind of a cool way to look at this because with him specifically, he's also a very good receiver too,
Yeah.
right? So like he is a kind of a versatile player in that sense, has pretty soft hands, has, that deceptive burst after the catch. I mean, tested freakishly. Like I said, a better RAS score than Derrick Henry. When ranked as a running back, his RAS score was 9.83. He ran a 4.6 140. So probably
Out of 10,
around,
by the way.
yeah, exactly. Out of 10. His 40 was probably his worst thing. Like his explosiveness grades as far as his broad jump, his vertical jump, great. Obviously, his size 6'3, 230 is great for a running back. His, agility grades are pretty good as well. I mean, when you run him as a fullback, though, David, you want to know what his RAS score is?
Tell me, Daniel.
It's 10. You had it. I didn't tell David before the
I
show. A
figured.
perfect 10 out of 10. And Tom Telesco did talk about, fullbacks in college, basically saying that, like, most fullbacks that they're looking for, at least they're converting from a different position. Like you're taking a linebacker or taking a tight end and kind
Yeah.
of turning them into a fullback. This dude was a straight up running back, but like one of the my favorite things that was said about Zander Horvath, who's just a literal horse, jumping over dudes and maybe being a bowling ball all around the field, was Brandon Staley's quote, "He's got a pro body and we're just going to figure it out."
Oh man, that's so funny. I absolutely love it. It's like that dude looks like he belongs in the NFL, so we are going to give him his shot to prove us right, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, it's a lazy comparison because he does run pretty high up. Like he's
Oh
a
yeah.
very upright runner, right? He's pretty stiff.
Yeah.
He's more of a weaver than a cutter. Like if he's
Sure.
juking dudes, he's usually coming like a complete stomp with a couple of chopped feet, but like that's obviously not his game. Tom Telesco
No.
said, in college he was basically Mike Allstott, who was, just one of the bigger bruising running backs of the early 2000s, right? Another guy late
Awesome guy to
90s.
watch, but not quite. Yeah, Mike
Yeah.
Allstott was a much larger man and absolutely just demolished people. And I mean, like I
Yeah.
said, I said Xander runs angry, but we're not on the Mike Allstott level here where you're
Oh
just
no.
taking 3, 4, 5, 6
Sure.
defenders with you and dragging them across the field. He wasn't exactly doing all that.
No, I mean, he definitely wasn't, but, like, he reminds me of, one of those Toby Gerhardt, Peyton
Yeah.
Hillis type of dudes where they're not gonna outrun you, they're not gonna shake you for the most part, even though Zander Horvath actually might outrun you. I mean, he's pretty pretty quick,
Yeah, he
but,
is.
I mean, he's a dude that's just a bowling ball. I mean, there was one play, I forget what team it was against, but, like, it was a 4th and 4, and he caught a pass behind the line of scrimmage, got hit behind the line of scrimmage, kept going, got hit by another dude, kept going, got hit by like 3 more dudes until he finally ended up getting a first down. It was
I'm
like
telling you, man, when in those short
heroic.
yardage situations, he has a nose to convert. It's like he takes it personally. And, you trust him with the ball in that situation where you got to have it. What Brandon Staley talks about all the time. You see that determination, and he goes out there and gets it. Most of the time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, Brandon Staley said it right. I mean, he's going to be a core special teams guy. That's
Oh
his
yeah,
route to the roster. I mean, they do want to see what it looks like to have, 2 back sets with him in it. As Brandon Staley said, and they all said he worked out very well. You can say that again, perfect 10 out of 10 out of fullbacks all time in college football. But like, who's counting? You know what I mean? But like, I get it. These late round picks, right? And I mean, in this case, I don't even know. I said it. Pick 260 in the 7th round, right? Borderline Mr. Irrelevant, only a couple
yeah,
picks away from being the final pick
literally,
in the draft, actually. Yeah. So, like, I mean, special teams is probably almost always going to play a factor in that. What that
of
role
course,
is going to change, but did play some special teams when he was at Purdue. So he does have some experience there, and that is going to be his easiest way. But when you're talking about guys like this, David, I mean, they're going to have to do special teams, and they're also kind of just like those hard knocks sweethearts where you're just hoping they can find a way to make the team, especially with a guy who runs and looks the way that Zander Horvath does, just with that brutal kind of running style and just wanting to be a bowling ball. You have to know what you're asking him for, but
yeah.
if you're just asking him to do those simple things, I mean, I can see how he could carve out a role. I mean, if you're telling me it's Austin Eckler, then Isaiah Spiller, and then this dude somehow has a role for those short yard situations, things like that. I mean, I could perfectly see the route,
Oh yeah,
how this dude makes the roster, which is not always an easy thing with the 260th overall pick, right? I mean, there's a chance every guy we talk about doesn't make the team, and it's just
yeah.
gonna be a battle,
He's going to be one of the guys that you're going to be excited to watch in preseason to see how he does and
100%.
how he, takes the, advantage of the opportunities that he's going to get because that's where he's going to have to shine if he's going to want to make this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be other things that we're going to talk about with Jazier Taylor and Deane Leonard that they're going to have to do to make the team as well. But
Yeah.
up next, we will be talking about the final 6th round pick for the Chargers, Jazier Taylor, in the path for him, a guy that started the most games in this school's history to make the Chargers, and what the upside he brings and what Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley had to say about him. But I can bet you one thing, David. I bet you that Zander Horvath has a good chance of being one of those preseason legends that'll be talked about long after his time. But if you guys are looking for the best bet, it's always at betonline.net, the only place that I bet and the official betting sponsor of the Locked On Chargers podcast. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. Basketball playoffs have been nuts. If you have some money on it, I mean, it definitely ratchets up the level of intensity. I mean, I've been feeling like I was in the game in these late fourth quarter crazy games that we've been seeing in the NBA, but I like to bet on a lot of things with betonline.net. It even goes as far as the live betting aspects of it, where you can change your fate in the middle of the games to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device so you guys can get in on the action at the best place to place your bets at BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, David, well, we went a little out of order today, obviously, going with the super back, as we're going to call him from here on out, Zander Horvath. But there were a couple of corners later on in the draft that the Chargers decided to go with, starting with Jazier Taylor, who is a guy who played a ton of games for Wake Forest, a guy of 62 career games. He was part of that, 5th year senior situation with COVID and everything. Players granted an extra year of availability. That's why Tom Telesco was saying that there were so many other guys, right? There were so many more guys in this draft than other years, where they just had to, really hone in on trying to figure out who the guys were they were going to be looking at. And they said they spent a lot of time, Staley did, right, on the later guys, because at one point they had 6 picks in the 6th and the 7th round. But David, when talking about this guy, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that people had in, as far as problems with the Chargers draft, and we'll get into the biggest things later on in the week that they didn't cover in the draft, because that's a big story, but was just where they selected the corners, right? Because in this case, they're selecting their 2 corners in the 6th and the 7th rounds. And that was a little bit surprising, just with we know is the depth. But one of the things that stood out to me with Jazier Taylor, and I mean, I will also preface this with these cornerbacks. I mean, it was incredibly hard to find tape on them to use for both Deane Leonard and Jazier Taylor, just because, I mean, especially lower prospects are harder to find. I was able to find a few videos, but we will also talk about, Staley and Telesco's comments on these guys as well. But the one thing I could see in those games, there's definitely a twitchiness here. He's obviously a very good athlete. He's a very quick athlete as well. There's some downside to it, but when you're talking about why the Chargers would take a bet on someone like this, Jazier Taylor, in the 6th round, later in the 6th round, right? I think that it's the quick twitch muscles that you definitely see there, how quickly he can break on stuff. Definitely a very willing tackler as well. And I mean, you can see the athletic traits that they could be trying to develop.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, good speed for the position. He flashes some good read and react skills. Every once in a while, you see him diagnose and go get and go take somebody out. He will fight the receiver when the ball's in the air. I saw him do that quite a bit. He's not going to make it easy for you to get an easy catch. Also adds some special teams value. I mean, it had 26, average 26 yards per kick return, and had a kick return touchdown, as Brandon Staley said, against Old Dominion there. So yeah, he has a physical profile and some twitchiness and athleticism that you definitely want out of your corners.
Yeah, and I mean, Brandon Staley said that one of their area scouts in that area is, former Demon Deacon Wake Forest quarterback. So that gave them some insider info on Jazier Taylor. And I think, I mean, that's what we've always talked about is, having the traits. But with him specifically, it seemed like there was a lot of special teams talk. As a player, obviously, being a 5-year guy, at Wake Forest, I mean, that's a long time. You get to see a lot of games. But I think started 23 games over the course of his career. Has decent measurables. He's not a tiny quarterback. He's not a super long, lanky cornerback by any means. And there's a lot to work on as well. I mean, he gave up, according to Dane Brugler, 5 touchdowns and also committed 9 penalties in 2021. So a raw prospect, to say the least. But it did seem like the kickoff part of this, the special teams part of it, was bigger on this pick when Brandon Staley was talking about it, because he said, Ryan Ficken specifically spent a lot of time on this guy. And the crazy thing about his kickoff return touchdown, David, it was his first ever kickoff return
That's wild.
in his college career, and he took it back for a touchdown. And obviously that earned him some, a couple more chances at it. And he
Oh, yeah.
didn't return a ton, just because he didn't do that until his final year in college. It was his first year returning kicks.
Yeah.
But I do like the thought process of, okay, yes, we bring in someone like DeAndre Carter, but we're also going to kind of bring in more guys. Not that that'll be his only role on the team, but someone else. Because last year, how many guys did they try out, right? It was like Larry
Yeah.
Roundtree, Zaire Adderley. I mean, so many dudes that
Jackson,
Justin
Jeremy
Jackson got a
Guyton.
little bit of run, a lot of KJ Hill on kick
Yeah.
returns as well, and none of them working out. At least now you have more legitimate options to try out if things don't go well with DeAndre Carter, if he gets hurt or something like that. But at least they're creating some competition there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can also see this guy as a gunner too. I mean, trying to replace some of the value that, you thought you were going to get from Ryan Smith. I think, with his 4.4 speed, this is a guy you can definitely, see running down there and covering kicks and adding value that way, because the Chargers need to add more team speed. And I think with these two corners in particular, at least that is definitely something that they bring to the table that you can utilize on special teams.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things are good on special teams. Obviously, you have to be able to tackle well, and there's some stuff there that he has to clean up. And it'll be also great to see him, add some strength. Not a ton of room on the frame to add
Yeah.
a lot of strength, but like he was feisty, right? When trying to get
Yeah.
through receivers and things like that, like he had a lot of fight. He wasn't just submitting
Sometimes he
and
needs to
letting
take better
himself.
angles, though, man. That's one of the
Sure, but
things
my
that,
bigger thing is, though, just because you can fight, it doesn't mean that you're going to be getting through these wide receivers, because too many times you gotten stuck up, and I stuck with those dudes, and I think that's more of a play strength thing. Just
yeah,
being able to get guys off you, because he's not the longest guy, so he's always going to have some disadvantage to some receivers and things like that. But I think if he gets a little stronger, it'll help with some of the missed tackles. It's also going to help with being able to be more physical, getting off those blocks, and being able to make tackles, because he does fit well in the running game, goes to the right spot. He gets there quickly a lot of the time. Those are all things that I liked from him. You can definitely see that quick trigger that I think the Chargers were definitely scouting out and trying to bring in. I mean, because if you look at JT Woods, if you look at this guy, if you look at Deane Leonard, that's something that all those dudes can do, is get downhill. They all love to fit against the run. None of them, have any hesitation going up and trying to make tackles. I love that as far as DBs go. And
yeah.
I mean, when Staley was talking about him, good dimensions, 4'4", 37-inch vertical, ball skills. And then, I mean, also played inside and outside. So that's definitely kind of the characteristics that they were going for, especially taking chances later on in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, they want guys that have that position flex, right? I mean, that can play on the outside, that can play in the slot. They want as many defensive backs that have as much versatility as possible, so that they can really try to figure out what the best combination is to attack specific offenses that they're going to go up against. The more defensive backs that you have, especially in the scheme that Brandon Staley likes to use, which is a lot of 5 and 6 DB groupings, that it's important to have as many corners as you want. And yeah, I mean, the talk about them taking corners late and not doing it earlier in the draft, I mean, you can remember that with the Rams, they took several guys late in the draft, and Brandon Staley was able to make that work and get some good production out of those guys. So hopefully he is able to do the same with these two gentlemen here.
Well, and you're setting yourself up for the future, right? I mean,
Yeah.
these are guys, you're taking more chances. You didn't get somebody early, but you're taking a couple of dart throws later on in the draft on guys you feel like you have tools that you can work with. And I think that's obviously the whole point of especially taking guys in the late 6th and early 7th round in this case, is just finding those guys that fit what you want. Because from a roster building perspective, Brandon Staley is still putting together, the type of players that he wants. There's still some leftovers from the Gus Bradley scheme, right, in the Anthony Lynn era. He's just filling this room with chances on guys that fit the way he likes to play, that do the things they like being a 2-time captain. I mean, you just look at that and you're like, okay, well, that played a big factor in it for sure.
Yeah.
But they worked this dude out, right? And they loved what they saw from him. And they decided to bring him in late. And I think it's a guy that I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's even going to for sure make the roster, but like I'll definitely be pulling for a guy that obviously has some fun tools to work with. If he can figure out some of the things that hindered him and, allowed him to commit 9 penalties and 5 touchdowns, like there is something there to work with. There's some multiple play that hopefully Brandon Staley can develop, because it is a whole developmental process. And not all these guys are, meant to be starters or drafted to be starters or even have significant roles, especially early on.
I feel like if he is able to capitalize on the opportunities he gets on special teams, where I feel like there is a large room for improvement, that's his best ticket to get onto this football team, is if he's able to make an impact there and really ingratiate himself and really take a role and own it through special teams. I think that is his way to get on the roster and then be able to finally, or at least be able to fight for playing time after that.
Yeah, I mean, making the roster is always the first thing, and that's what's so impressive about, the next guy we're going to talk about as well, trying to make the roster after playing in a playing Canadian college football a few years ago with Deane Leonard, the defensive back from Ole Miss. And then he started playing in the SEC against the likes of Treylon Burks, right? And other guys like Jamison Williams. That must have been a ton of fun. How crazy of a story that is. We're going to get into Deane Leonard and his story to making the Chargers coming up right after this. But I need to tell you guys that the best place to get any kind of auto part at any time is rockauto.com. I mean, there's a lot of things that these prospects could fix, and they're going to need to make it on the Chargers roster and to be impactful players for them. But when you need to fix your car, the only place to go is Rock Auto, because not only are you going to find the most seamless process and save yourself the headache of having to go into a local chain auto parts store, talk to the guy at the counter, and have you ask you a million questions about something you just don't know enough about, at least in my case, who doesn't know a lot about cars. On rockauto.com, I was able to go type the type of car in that I have. In a few easy clicks, I found the part that I needed. I've already used the rockauto.com 3 times. It's not something you want to have to do, buy auto parts, but when you do have to do it, use rockauto.com, because the other part of it is you're going to save a ton of money. Rockauto.com has the best prices you're going to find out there and the best inventory, but why spend 30, 50, even 100% more on parts that you could get at rockauto.com? A family business. So make sure you guys go to rockauto.com right now to see all the parts they have available for your car or truck, and write Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. All right, well, we have one more, the final draft pick in some weird world that we're in right now, doing these things out of order. The Chargers' first of their 7th round picks, another defensive back. They doubled down in the 6th and the 7th round, and this one is Deane Leonard, the defensive back from Ole Miss, who, David, I want to talk first just about this dude's story because it's pretty cool. I mean, the dude was playing at Calgary University in Canada and absolutely balled out. He had 6 interceptions in 23 career games, which is nuts.
First team All-Canada twice.
He was an All-Canadian twice. I mean, a 2-time All-Canadian. If that was All-American, I mean, everyone would be freaking out. But just because it's All-Canadian, nobody wants to give him the credit he deserves.
Put some respect on his name.
But for that dude, David, I mean, to be playing in Calgary, to go to Ole Miss, he ended up only starting 2 games in his first season with Ole Miss, and then the next season started all 11 games and ends up getting drafted to the Chargers in the 7th round. I mean, this is going to be a dude I'm pulling for sure. A fun prospect to talk about, but I mean, that story is pretty cool because he was just playing for the Calgary Dinos, winning championships for them a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, what a great story to be
What
able
a great
to...
name for a college football team too, huh? The Calgary Dinos. I just found out about them, with this pick. So
phenomenal. I love it. I mean, I want to see what the mascot looks like, and it better not disappoint.
It's a
dinosaur. I know, but it better be the right dinosaur. Okay, if not, then we're gonna have some problems.
Oh my God, I don't even know what the right dinosaur is anymore. Go on.
But Deane Leonard, loved he is a guy that modeled his game after Stephon Gilmore. That's a guy who he really looked up to, a bigger corner. Makes sense, right? When you look at his measurables, this guy's 6 foot, 195 pounds.
That's tall for a corner, guys. Don't get it twisted. I mean, if you're over 6, that's great for a cornerback.
Yeah, he's got some decent size there for sure. As far as things that he does well, I feel like he's got the good size and the good length and speed for the position. He's got the measurables that you look for.
4.39 40.
Yeah, 4.39. Yeah, speed, baby, speed. Like I said, the
you
Chargers
put a 4 with a 3 next to it, you're going to start getting some people's attention.
Yes, absolutely, no question about it. Has fluid hips as well, which I saw him. He's able to open those up and really get into his back pedal. Also showed an ability to play in the nickel as well. Another guy with positional flexibility. He just learned to play in the nickel in 2021 because in Canada, he had never played press ever before in his life. He has never played press. So he learned how to play press and learned how to play nickel in the 2021 season. A lot of learning, a huge learning curve from going from Canada to at the SEC, one of the most physical and one of the best divisions in all of college football. So to see that transition and to see that he was able to, really, make that giant leap, I think that you have to commend him for that. But like I said, he has a couple of good skills and good abilities that could translate.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, pretty much was echoed, by Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley as well. Like I said, I mean, I'll be pulling for these guys because the other thing is too is like I hate to rip any kind of prospect, right? Because
Yeah,
like at one point I was the kid trying to make it and hope I got drafted, right? So like
absolutely.
for these dudes to get drafted, even in the 7th round, like what that means to these dudes and their families, getting to be there and getting to call your dad and tell him, hey,
You're
I
one
got
of
drafted. Like
262 people that got drafted.
100%. Like to be able to have that moment with your family, whether or not you make it long term in the NFL, it doesn't matter. That family will always cherish that moment.
Never
And like
take it away
I'm
from you.
pulling for all these dudes. I know they can't make the team, but like especially cool stories, you definitely find those guys. So I'm pulling for them. There are some cons. I
Yes.
mean, obviously not a ton of experience against that top talent in the SEC, only the 2
Right.
seasons and really only started in 2021 for the most part. Gets a little handsy, has some things to work on there. While he is smooth as far as flipping his hips and especially running deep, the in breaking cuts and things like that, he can be a little bit clunky there, take a couple extra steps that he doesn't need to take. And I think he'll start trusting, his ability a little bit more as he gets coached up. And I mean, if you're just talking about traits, I mean, getting a guy with a really, another RAS guy, another guy who, 4.3, 940, has some real athletic tools to work with and has that physical profile. Tom Telesco said when they were looking at this guy, cover skills, inside out flex, which is something you brought up, ran well and is also very quick. You can see some of that. And I mean, Staley, echoed the same thing. Ran a really low 4.4, smooth in transition, really good in run support. I mean, I think the really good in run support, he really wants to fill. I think he goes to the right
Yeah.
spot. He tries to get outside leverage on wide receivers to turn runs back in and stuff. But another guy just needs, an off season in an NFL training room, right? Because it's like he
Yeah.
was in Canada getting trained in totally different facilities and conditions. Then you go to Ole Miss, which is much better, obviously, but it's been a process for him putting
Yeah.
on the weight and getting that, NFL ready strength. That's something he has to find. And then Brandon Steele also had an interesting comment, Dave, because he said he reminded him of Mark Webb last year. Just has a lot of traits that we feel like translate at the next level.
Yeah, I mean, you like to hear that. I mean, Mark Webb was one of those guys that I thought that Brandon Staley was trying to, cook up in his mad science lab, in a guy that you could really move all over the place.
Still could
But
too, right?
yeah, and hopefully he comes back healthy. But like I said, another defensive back for Brandon Staley to figure out what he does and how he can possibly help. I'd like to see him increase his physicality in his approach. I mean, he wants like he's around the football, but I like to see him, kind of, get in touch with this inner Tasmanian devil. I want him to go out there and run through people. He needs to stop the ankle tackling too. I saw that way too much. Needs to transition that to wrapping up. I mean, I feel like the skills are there. The athleticism is there. I feel like the coaching is where that the potential is going to marry up, and hopefully when he gets into an NFL strength and conditioning program with NFL coaches, we can see the best possible version of Mr. Deane Leonard.
Yeah, and I mean, we know how much Brandon Staley loves these corners, and he loves these DBs, and both of these guys, they talked about the flex and being able to play everywhere, right? But the other thing is, too, that we have to remember, and Brandon Staley also brought this up when talking about the day 3 guys, is just that the safeties are going to be basically playing one of the cornerback positions at least a substantial amount of time, the way Brandon Staley's
Yeah,
talking about it, right? I mean, these
right.
guys playing up in the slot, which means you're only going to have 2 true cornerbacks out there, which, as we see it now, is probably Asante Samuel Jr., right? And also,
JC Jackson.
JC Jackson, not even including Michael Davis, who would be 3 in that sense, right? And
Yep.
then now Tavon Campbell is even further away, from getting on the field. As far as these 2 dudes go, I mean, I don't know if they're upgrading on Tavon Campbell, right? I mean, that's way too soon to say. The other Canadian, Tavon
Yeah.
Campbell, one of the other of the 5. But I do love the fact that it's just like, hey, we're just going to try to add as much competition there as possible, get more dudes that kind of fit what we want to do, and like have a much better, competition at that position going into the season to see kind of how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's the roster transition continues, getting guys that are going to meet the specifications that they are
Building it
looking
in his
for,
image, right?
right? That are going to play the
My
way that
God.
Brandon Staley wants to play defense. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. I like the fact that they're adding more people to the secondary. They're trying to improve it. They're trying to improve the depth. which, like I said, will also improve the special teams, just getting more
And
athleticism.
improving the overall speed and athleticism too, 100%. I mean, they've gotten much
Exactly.
more athletic in their defensive secondary for sure. These
Yeah,
2
with
dudes and JT Woods, I mean,
yeah,
that's more for sure.
more speed, and you guessed it, more speed. And that's something that the Chargers needed to address. They needed to add. So I think that's gonna, we'll see how that works out. But I mean, more
Exactly.
opportunities to try to get the type of defense that Brandon Staley wants to play.
Yeah, and I mean, more speed is always great, but then I think all 3 of those dudes also have to learn how to tackle better too. So,
Yes, indeed.
you getting there is a big part of it. Finishing it once you get there is another big part of it. But like I can see what they're going for with these guys, and I'm not gonna stamp my approval of them making the roster, but I'm excited to watch it. I'm excited to see how these dudes do when they are out there in the preseason, when they are out there at training camp, going up against true NFL talent. That's gonna suss out a lot of it, right?
Yeah.
That's gonna flesh out the contenders and the guys who don't belong very quickly
See how
once
you
the
do
pads come on.
covering Keenan Allen and Mike Williams.
Exactly. I mean, that's how we're gonna find out what these dudes have, right? Or at least, a couple reps here and there where you're like, okay, I see it. That's him competing for that thing. We've
Yeah.
seen it, with Asante Samuel Jr. last year and Josh Palmer. Like that's gonna be such a fun part of this is to see how these dudes grow throughout training camp and how they develop through the season and just trying to fight for that last roster spot potentially and doing all it takes to do that because that's how a lot of these great undrafted free agents and late round guys ended up starting their story. And these guys are just starting. So I'm definitely going to be pulling for all of them for sure. But that is going to wrap things up on today's show. To make sure you don't miss tomorrow's show, go subscribe now to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and follow the show for free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcast from, because we're going to tell you why the Chargers made the right decision not picking up Jerry Tillery's fifth-year option. We'll get into that and the ramifications of that on tomorrow's show. But until then, you can also find the show on all of our social media, including at Locked On LAC on Twitter and on my Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Droegemeier's at DroTalk SD. If you guys want to get your draft grades, draft questions, any of that stuff on the show, you can also call into 323-524-7924 to the Chargers Locked On Chargers voicemail line. And you can also find us at Locked On Chargers on Instagram and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But I'm excited to talk about Jerry Tillery tomorrow and to have some more fresh content for you guys then. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.